I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer it, not to me, but to yourself. What do you want? Not what you would like, not what would be nice, not what you dream about in the comfortable hours between sleep and waking, when there is no cost to dreaming. What do you want? I have spent the better part of 20 years asking that question. I have sat across from men of extraordinary achievement, men whose names you know, and men whose names the world never recorded. I asked every one of them the same thing, and what I found, after 500 interviews, was not what I expected. I expected to find that great men were smarter than the rest. I expected to find that they had advantages, better education, better connections, better circumstance. I was wrong. The difference between the man who achieves and the man who does not is not intelligence. It is not education. It is not the family he was born into or the city he grew up in. It is desire. Not desire in the way the word is carelessly used. Not the mild preference a man calls desire when he says he wants a better life, while doing nothing to obtain it. I mean desire in its true form. Burning. Consuming. The kind that rearranges a man from the inside. The kind that makes retreat not merely difficult, but impossible. By the time this lecture is finished, you will understand not only what desire is, you will understand with uncomfortable clarity why you have been failing to harness it. Let me tell you about the most common condition I observed in my years of research. It has no formal name in medicine, but it is as widespread as any disease I know and far more destructive, because unlike most diseases, it feels comfortable. The condition is this: most men do not desire anything. They wish. Now, I want you to understand the difference between those two words, because most men use them as though they mean the same thing. They do not. A wish is passive. A wish asks the world to arrange itself on your behalf. A wish sits in a man's mind like furniture, present, comfortable, entirely stationary. It does not demand anything of him. It does not disturb his sleep. It does not reorganize his days. It simply sits there, familiar and harmless, collecting dust. I want you to think of someone you know. Perhaps you know him well. Perhaps, if you are being truly honest, perhaps that someone is you. He is not a stupid man. He is not a lazy man in the conventional sense. He goes to work. He meets his obligations. He is, by most measures, a decent and capable human being. And yet, year after year, his life looks more or less the same. He will tell you he wants more, a better life, a stronger business, greater financial security, more time with the people he loves. And he means it, in the moment he says it. But watch what he does when the conversation ends. He goes back to what he was doing, the same routines, the same habits, the same thinking. Because wanting more and burning for more are not the same thing. A man who wishes for wealth goes to bed at night thinking about what his life might look like if circumstances were different. And he wakes in the morning, and he goes about his day, and nothing changes. Because a wish requires nothing of you. Desire, true desire, is something altogether different. Desire does not ask the world to arrange itself. Desire compels you to arrange yourself. It is not a feeling you carry. It is a force that carries you. It reorganizes your thinking. It reorganizes your time. It reorganizes what you are willing to endure and what you are no longer willing to accept. The man who merely wishes, tolerates his circumstances while dreaming of different ones. The man who truly desires changes his circumstances because he cannot tolerate them remaining as they are. I want you to sit with that distinction for a moment, because here is what I observed across 500 interviews, across men of every background, every industry, every station of life. The men who failed, almost without exception, were not lacking in intelligence. They were not lacking in opportunity. They were not lacking in education or ability or even ambition, as the world uses that word. They were lacking in desire, and most of them did not know it. That is the cruelest feature of wishing. It masquerades as desire. It feels from the inside as though you want something very much. A man can speak passionately about his dreams. He can describe in vivid detail the life he intends to build. He can convince his friends, his family, and most dangerously, he can convince himself that he is a man of burning desire. And then the first serious obstacle appears, and the wish evaporates. Because that is the test, not the talking, not the planning, not the dreaming in comfortable hours. The test is what happens when the circumstance turns against you, when the effort required exceeds what you anticipated, when the people around you begin to counsel retreat. At that moment, desire and wishing reveal themselves for what they are. The man who was wishing stops. He finds a reason. There is never a shortage of reasons. The timing wasn't right. The economy turned. He would have succeeded, he tells himself, if only circumstances had been different. The man who was burning continues, not because he is unaware of the obstacle, not because he is reckless or unintelligent, but because for him, stopping is not among the available options. I said this is a disease, and I meant it seriously, because a disease, if you do not know you have it, will progress unchecked. And I have watched men spend entire lifetimes wishing, productive, intelligent, decent men, who went to their graves having never formed a single genuine burning desire. They accumulated instead preferences, comforts, complaints, a long list of things they would have done if only. Do not let that be your autobiography. The question I put to you, and I want you to answer it honestly because an honest answer is the beginning of everything, is simply this. What you have been calling desire, is it truly that? Or have you been wishing? Because until you can answer that question honestly, nothing else I am about to tell you will be of any use to you whatsoever. Now I want to tell you something that most men never stop to consider. They hear the words burning desire, and they nod. They agree. They find it reasonable. And then they go back to their lives entirely unchanged, because they have understood the words, but they have not understood the mechanism. So let us examine it. What does a burning desire actually do to a man? The first thing it does is change what he sees. I do not mean that in a poetic sense. I mean it literally. Two men can stand in the same room, look at the same situation, speak to the same people, and walk away having seen entirely different things. The man without desire sees what is in front of him. The man with a burning desire sees what is possible. And here is what most people do not understand about that. The opportunity was not hidden from the first man. It was not locked behind a door he lacked the key to. It was right there, in plain sight, available to anyone in that room, but only the man with desire could see it. Because desire does something to the human mind that nothing else can replicate. It focuses it. Not in the way that concentration focuses it, through effort and discipline, but automatically, effortlessly, the way a lens focuses light. When a man burns for something, truly burns for it, his mind begins to organize itself around that object. Every conversation becomes relevant. Every encounter becomes an opportunity to be examined. Every setback becomes information rather than defeat. The man without desire walks through the same world and sees none of it. You will see this proven before this lecture is finished. You will see it in the story of a man who walked into one of the greatest laboratories in the world with nothing in his pockets and everything in his mind. And you will understand that what separated him from every other man who passed through those same doors was not talent, not education, not connection. It was what he burned for. The second thing a burning desire does is outlast reason. Now, reason is a valuable faculty. I do not dismiss it. But reason is a fair-weather companion. When circumstances are favorable, reason supports you. When circumstances turn difficult, reason begins to negotiate. It produces arguments, logical, reasonable, compelling arguments for why you should stop. The timing is not right. The odds are against you. Sensible men have tried and failed. Perhaps this is not meant to be. Reason will dress retreat in very dignified clothing, and most men accept the outfit. But here is what I want you to understand about the men who built the great fortunes of this world. The men I sat across from. The men whose methods I studied for 2 decades. They were not unreasonable men. They were not reckless men. They did not ignore the odds. They simply had something operating inside them that was stronger than the odds. And when reason said stop, that something said not yet. I have observed this in failure as well, and the observation is instructive. I have watched men of considerable intelligence, men far better educated than those who ultimately succeeded, abandon their goals at the precise moment that success was closest. Not because they lacked ability, not because the obstacle was insurmountable, but because reason reached them before desire could hold them. The argument was sound, the logic was impeccable, and it was wrong. Desire, true desire, does not negotiate with reason. It does not sit across the table and weigh the arguments. It answers reason the same way every time. Not yet. The third thing a burning desire does, perhaps the most powerful of all, is eliminate the possibility of retreat. There is a story, and we will return to it in greater depth, of a military commander who, upon landing on foreign shores with his army, gave an order that his men considered madness. He ordered the ships burned. Every vessel, every means of return, gone. And in doing so, he did not merely strand his men on foreign soil. He changed the only question available to them. It was no longer, shall we advance or retreat? It was only, how do we win? A burning desire does this automatically. The man who truly burns for something has already, in his own mind, burned the ships. Retreat is not an option he is resisting. It is an option that no longer exists for him. And I want you to understand what that does to a man's daily life. When retreat is possible, the mind entertains it, not always consciously, but it is there. A background option, a door left slightly open, and the existence of that door changes how hard the man pushes against the one in front of him. But when retreat has been eliminated, when the ships are ash and the harbor is empty, something shifts in a man. His resourcefulness sharpens, his creativity expands, his tolerance for difficulty increases, because the mind, when it understands there is no going back, stops dividing its energy between advancing and retreating and puts everything into moving forward. This is the quality that separates the men in my research who achieved remarkable things from the men who came close and stopped. Coming close is not the same as arriving, and the only variable, in almost every case I examined, was whether the man's desire was strong enough to survive the moment when stopping became an option. So I ask you to consider something, not as a criticism, but as a diagnosis. Think of something you have been pursuing, or something you have told yourself you intend to pursue, and ask yourself, honestly, have you burned the ships? Or are they still sitting in the harbor, waiting, just in case? Because as long as they sit there, you are not yet operating from desire. You are operating from hope. And hope is just wishing with better posture. I want to tell you about a man named Edwin Barnes. You have likely never heard that name, and that, in itself, is part of the lesson. Barnes was not a wealthy man, not an educated man. He had no connections, no reputation, no credentials that would have opened a single door for him in the world of business. What he had was a thought. A single, consuming, obsessive thought. He was going to become a business partner of Thomas Edison. Not an employee, not an assistant. A partner. He arrived at Edison's laboratory in New Jersey, having traveled by his own account in a manner not far removed from a tramp. No money to speak of, no appointment, no letter of recommendation from anyone whose name Edison would have recognized. And yet Edison received him. He said later that he saw something in Barnes's expression that told him the man had made up his mind to get what he came for. Not hoped for, not wished for, made up his mind to get. Barnes was given a small position in the organization, modest work, modest pay. Most men would have taken that as a kind rejection dressed as an opportunity. Barnes took it as the entry point. He stayed, he worked, he kept his desire burning through months and then years of ordinary labor. And then his moment came. Edison had developed a dictating machine. His own sales organization was skeptical. They did not believe it could be sold. Barnes saw it differently. He approached Edison directly, and he sold that machine with such success that Edison gave him a contract to distribute it across the entire country. The man who arrived as a tramp left as a partner. Now I want you to notice what actually happened in that story. Because most people hear it and take from it the wrong lesson. They say, Barnes was persistent. Barnes was patient. And while that is true, it misses the point entirely. Persistence without desire is merely stubbornness. It produces suffering, not results. What made Barnes different was that his desire was so specific, so precisely defined, that it trained his mind to recognize the moment his opportunity arrived. When the Ediphone appeared, he saw it. Not because he was smarter than the other men in that building, but because his desire had been pointing him toward exactly that kind of moment for 5 years. The other men saw a machine their employer was trying to sell. Barnes saw everything he had been waiting for. Same room, same machine, same day. Different desire, different outcome. Now I want to tell you a different kind of story. Not a story of success, but a story of failure. And I want you to pay close attention, because this failure contains a lesson worth more than almost anything else in this lecture. A man staked a mining claim in the American West during the gold rush. After weeks of hard labor, he found a vein of ore. He brought in equipment, brought in his nephew, a man I will call R.U. Darby, and they began to drill in earnest. The first returns from the smelter confirmed it. This was one of the richest finds in Colorado. And then the vein disappeared. They drilled on, desperately, and found nothing. Finally, exhausted and out of money, they quit. They sold their equipment to a junk dealer for a few $100s and went home. The junk dealer called a mining engineer before he touched a thing. The engineer examined the site and made a simple calculation. The previous owners had stopped, he said, because they did not understand fault lines. The gold was 3 feet from where they had stopped drilling. 3 feet. The junk dealer dug and found millions. I have told that story many times, and every time I tell it, I watch the same expression cross the faces of the people listening. A quiet recognition. Because most people, if they are honest, know exactly what it feels like to stop 3 feet from gold. But here is the part most people never hear. Darby went home. He licked his wounds, and then he made a decision. He was going to learn from what had happened, or it was going to destroy him. He chose to learn. Darby went into insurance. He became one of the most successful salesmen of his generation, and he told me that every time a prospect said no, every time a door closed in his face, he heard the sound of that drill stopping 3 feet short. And he kept going. His desire had been forged in failure, and it was stronger for it. Barnes and Darby. One man who arrived with nothing and became a partner. One man who came within 3 feet of a fortune and walked away. The difference between them was not intelligence, not opportunity, not circumstance. It was the depth and the durability of their desire. Everything else was just the story that surrounded it. Now we arrive at the question every man asks, or ought to ask, after hearing what desire has done for others. How? Not in the abstract, not in the philosophical sense, but practically, concretely, how does a man take what he wants and transmute it into something real? I have identified 6 specific steps, and I want to be clear about something before we go through them. These are not suggestions. They are not a loose framework for you to adapt and personalize according to your comfort. They are a method, and a method works when it is followed, not when it is approximated. The first step is this: fix in your mind the exact amount of money you desire. Not a range, not an approximation, not the vague instruction to think big. An exact figure. I want you to understand why that matters. The subconscious mind is a remarkably powerful instrument, but it cannot act on a vague instruction. If you tell it you want more money, it has nothing to work with. More than what? More by when? More in exchange for what? A vague desire produces vague results. An exact desire gives the mind something it can organize itself around. The second step: determine exactly what you intend to give in return for the money you desire. This step stops most men cold, because most men have not thought about it. They want the money, but they have not seriously considered what they will give in exchange for it. And here is where wishing reveals itself again. A wish expects something for nothing. Desire understands that everything has a price, and names that price clearly and willingly. The third step: establish a definite date by which you intend to have the money you desire. Not approximately, not soon, not within the next few years. A date, because a goal without a deadline is not a goal. It is a preference, and we have already established what preferences produce. The fourth step: create a definite plan for carrying out your desire, and begin at once, whether you are ready or not. Most men wait until the plan is perfect, until the circumstances are right, until they feel prepared. I am emphatic on this point. The plan need not be perfect. It will change. It will need revision. But the act of beginning, of moving, does something to a man's mind that no amount of preparation can replicate. It tells the subconscious that this is real, that this is not a wish, that this is a thing in motion. The fifth step: write out a clear, concise statement, the amount you intend to acquire, the date by which you intend to have it, what you intend to give in return, and the plan through which you intend to get it. Write it out, not in your mind, on paper, in your own hand, because there is something about the physical act of writing that commits a man in a way that thinking alone never does. The thought stays in the mind where it can be quietly revised, softened, or abandoned. The written statement stares back at you. The sixth step, and this is the one that separates the men who follow this method from the men who merely read about it. Read your written statement aloud twice every day, once when you wake, once before you sleep. And as you read it, see yourself already in possession of what you desire. Feel it, not as a future event you are hoping for, but as a present reality you are moving toward with absolute certainty. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You are thinking this sounds uncomfortably close to something a man does when he has run out of practical options. I understand that reaction, and I want to address it directly. I am not prescribing fantasy. I am not asking you to close your eyes and pretend that reality is different from what it is. I am asking you to do something far more demanding than that. I am asking you to impress upon your subconscious mind, through repetition and through emotion, a clear and specific picture of what you intend to create. Because the subconscious mind does not respond to words alone. It responds to words charged with feeling. Desire without emotion is a dead letter. It passes through the mind and leaves nothing behind. But desire, held in the mind with clarity and felt with genuine conviction, begins to influence everything: your decisions, your perceptions, your actions, your responses to adversity. Not through magic, through the accumulated weight of a mind that has been given a clear instruction and has been given it every single day. I want to draw a distinction that I believe is the most important thing I will say in this entire lecture. And I want you to listen carefully, because it is easy to hear and easy to miss at the same time. There is a difference between the man who wishes he were wealthy and the man who knows he will be. Not believes, not hopes, not feels reasonably confident. Knows. The wishing man speaks in conditionals. He says, if things go well, if the timing is right, if the opportunity presents itself, if circumstances cooperate. Every sentence contains an exit. Every plan contains a contingency for failure. Every statement of intention is quietly undermined by the possibility that it may not happen. And because he has left that door open, his mind never fully commits, his energy is divided, his actions are tentative, and the results he produces are exactly what you would expect from a man who is not entirely sure he is going to succeed. The man who knows speaks differently, acts differently, carries himself differently. Not with arrogance, not with the hollow confidence of a man performing certainty for an audience, but with the quiet, settled conviction of a man who has already decided. I observed this quality in every man of significant achievement I ever studied. It was not something they had acquired through success. It preceded the success. The knowing came first. The results followed. Consider Barnes. He did not arrive at Edison's laboratory hoping he might become a partner someday if things worked out. He arrived knowing. The circumstances argued against him at every turn. The evidence available to any reasonable observer said his goal was absurd. Barnes did not argue with the evidence. He simply did not accept it as the final word. And Darby, in his second life, his insurance career, knew that every no was 3 feet from a yes. He did not hope prospects would eventually buy. He knew that persistence applied in the right direction, with the right desire behind it, would eventually produce the result he was after. This is what I mean when I say that definiteness of desire produces definiteness of result. A vague desire asks the world a question. A burning desire makes a statement. And the world, in my observation, responds very differently to statements than it does to questions. So I put it to you plainly. You have sat through this lecture. You have heard the arguments. You have heard the stories. You have been given the method. And now the only question that remains is the same one I asked you at the very beginning. What do you want? Not what you would like, not what would be nice, not what you think is reasonable given your current circumstances. What do you want? Because if you can answer that question with a number, a date, a plan, and an unshakable conviction that it will be so, then you are no longer wishing. You have crossed the line into desire, and everything changes on the other side of that line. I want to leave you with something tonight. Not an inspiration, not a sentiment to carry with you for a day or two before it fades back into the noise of ordinary life. A demand. Because everything I have laid before you in this lecture, the distinction between wishing and desire, the mechanism by which desire operates, the stories of the men who proved it, the 6 steps that transmute it into reality, none of it is of any use to you whatsoever if you walk away unchanged. And most people will. Not because they did not understand, not because they disagreed, but because understanding is comfortable and action is not. Because nodding along to a lecture costs nothing, and committing to a burning desire costs everything. Most people will find that price too high. They will return to their preferences, their comforts, their quiet wishes, and they will tell themselves that someday, when the timing is better, when the circumstances are right, when they feel more prepared, they will act on what they heard today. Someday is not a date. And we have already established what happens to a desire without a date. So here is what I am asking of you. Tonight, not tomorrow, not this weekend, not when you find the time. Tonight, before you sleep, take a piece of paper and write down what you want. The exact figure, the exact date, what you will give in return, and the beginning of a plan, however imperfect, for how you intend to get there. Then read it, out loud. And as you read it, do not recite it like a man reading a list of instructions. Read it like a man who already knows how the story ends. Because that is the difference. That has always been the difference. The men I studied did not achieve what they achieved because the world was kinder to them than it has been to you. They did not succeed because they were born with something you were not. They succeeded because they wanted something, specifically, definitively, completely, and they refused to stop wanting it until it was theirs. That capacity is not reserved for them. It is available to any man willing to pay the price of genuine desire. The question, the only question that has ever mattered, is whether you are willing to pay it. I believe you are. But belief, as we have established, is not enough. You must know. Good night.